Today, I'm with the first pick. The NFL Combine is next week, and we're firing up the old mock draft machine. I'm inviting some friends along to help me make all 32 picks. I'm Ryan Wilson. That's CBS Sports NFL draft analyst Josh Edwards. And that handsome devil there, that's the Director of Football Operations and Player Personnel for the Shrine Bowl, Eric Galko, coming off a very successful Shrine Bowl a few weeks ago. No one knows more about these players than Eric, so I'm excited to have him here. And guys, just so you know, you can't see it here in the shot, but trust me, if there's a one shot, you would see there's 64 days until the 2025 NFL draft, which is bonkers to think about. All right, guys, we're doing a mock draft. And Josh, because Eric is our guest, we're going to let him go first. And we're also going to throw in some trades here because, we can't just do normally all 32 picks. That would be too boring. Eric, good to see you, buddy. Congratulations again on that great Shrine Bowl. You had with the first pick down there, and we had a blast. But right now, you're the GM of the Tennessee Titans, and you got some decisions to make. What are you doing at number one?
Yeah, I think it's an easy choice for me if I'm the Tennessee Titans and new GM Mike Borgonzi. And it's finding, I think, a franchise quarterback that can not only shape the identity of the offense, but also shape the identity of the locker room and the culture. And I think it's a tough decision between Shedeur Sanders, who's a Shrine Bowl alum, and Cam Ward of Miami, who did no All-Star game this year as well, too. And I think I'll lean towards what a lot of people around the team, around the league feel is that if they had to choose their quarterback as of today, that may be Cam Ward at Miami. I think Cam Ward's a special person off the field, a dynamic talent on the field, can make plays, can improvise at a really high level. I think for a Tennessee Titans offense that wants to be a little bit flexible, they're not really sure who their best impact players are going to be at receiver and running back for the long term. I think Cam Ward has a lot of versatility to make plays off script and make plays downfield too. So he'd be the pick if I was Tennessee Titans picking first overall.
Right. You need a quarterback, and, we'll figure this out. And I ask you this quickly, Eric, and this is a question we've, talked about for months, it feels like. Last year's draft class, where are you slotting Cam Ward?
I think he'd be really in that. I think the first three picks were pretty special, right? Caleb Williams, we knew how special he was in college his whole time. I think Drake May kind of got underappreciated because of how good that class was last year, but he was a guy that teams would have picked first overall in any draft class. And then Jane Daniels had one of the most historic seasons in college history. I think those three guys probably still go 1, 2, 3, but I think Cam Ward would have been in discussion, but then him and Shedeur would be very much in that 4 or 5 discussion if in last year's draft class. So last year, those top 3 picks were really special. We won't see that again, I think, for some time, but I think Cam and Shedeur are right there among other first overall or top 5 considered quarterbacks the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to put it as well. Out of context, when you don't include 2024, Cam and Shedeur feel like they're right in the range of top 5 picks, but last year's class was so insanely great that it's a little tougher there. All right, Josh, you have pick number 2 because you're a frequent guest, but, you're not here all the time, so I was being polite. But I'm also going to just pull the rug out from under you and make a trade up here. I'm going to be the Raiders. You're trading down from number 2 as you're Cleveland Browns. You are, in fact, a Cleveland Browns fan. You tell people that publicly, which is something that I give you great credit for. But as the Las Vegas Raiders, this is pretty easy. Tom Brady, Pete Carroll, Shedeur Sanders. I'm just going to take a quarterback here. They got to figure this out. Last year, they didn't have to settle at 13 for Brock Bowers, but all the quarterbacks were gone, so they took Brock Bowers, and that was an absolute grand slam of a pick. So now Shedeur Sanders can throw to Brock Bowers and feel good about that. And the offensive line will be eminently better than it was for him at Colorado, where he took a beating. He was one of the toughest kids in college football last year with the way he got up after every single hit and just went back to the huddle and kept making plays. Next up, number 3, I'm officially the Giants. Joe Shane, Brian Dable, and Abdul Carter makes sense here if you're the Giants. I'm taking Travis Hunter. They need a quarterback. They miss out on the first 2 guys. I don't think another quarterback's going to go in the first round, at least certainly this high. Maybe something happens at the back end of round 1. But Travis Hunter gets fan bases excited. He's going to play cornerback. He can play wide receiver. And Eric, I'll ask you again, since you're our guest here. Any real sense from teams about Travis Hunter? It's going to be cornerback, but I would imagine a lot of them want to use him as a wide receiver package too.
Yeah, I think people are too quick to say he's got to pick one or the other. And he just did it at Colorado with an incredible amount of snaps per game and throughout the season, and he's healthy. And I think it's obviously naive to think that he'll be healthy in that same exact role in the NFL, just the NFL wear and tear. But I really think this is a unicorn level prospect. I mean, I can't think of many guys in the last 2 decades that feel as special as Travis Hunter can be. Myles Garrett comes to mind, Calvin Johnson, and that may be the list of the last 20 plus years of guys that I feel can truly be maybe worth taking over a quarterback. If you need a quarterback in the draft class, those 3 guys really jump out. So I think he'll be a corner. That's probably the easiest projection because corners are there's not as many great corners as there are receivers in the NFL right now. I think he'll be a corner first, but I think you'd be wrong to have Travis be a corner and then a situational receiver. I want to get him on the field as much as possible. We saw what it was at Colorado, historic season. I think the Giants or whomever will want him to use both sides of the ball pretty frequently.
All right, Josh, I swear we're going to get to you in a second here, but at that trade down, we got to come back to Eric. He's the general manager for the New England Patriots. And Eric, I'll just say this. The last 2 years, the Patriots have taken a lot of interior offensive linemen. They got Drake May. Is this the pick at 4 where you're going to take an offensive tackle?
It's considered. I think if Travis Hunter would be here, what a slam dunk fit that would be to grow with Drake May to help that receiver room kind of round out. And then at corner, still a need from this well, too. But I think the best player on the board is Abdul Carter at Penn State. I think he's best player available. The Patriots want to kind of retool this defense and keep building in the new Mike Vrabel's identity. And by comparison, Mike Vrabel's first draft in Tennessee back in 2018, when he was the head coach, their first pick was a linebacker, Rashaan Evans, second round pick, Harold Landry. So when Mike Vrabel got to Tennessee, he wanted to make the defense and his identity. I think Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, but in this case, Abdul Carter would be a great fit to help kind of rebuild that Patriots defense. It's already maybe a strength of their roster, but making a strength even further with a guy like Mike Vrabel at the helm would be a wise idea.
All right, Josh, you're finally here as the GM of the Jaguars. Finally, you made it. Before we get there, I mentioned you're a Browns fan. What do you think the likelihood is that they trade down from 2? Because if they trade Myles Garrett, that's going to be a lot of draft picks, probably 1, maybe more first-round picks. And then you trade down from 2. Are you just screaming, throwing in the towel, I'm going to rebuild? Or is this an opportunity for a team that won 11 games, 2023, by the way, just to get back in the mix if they can sort of get a couple picks right?
Well, first of all, I think you tell people that I'm a Browns fan more than I do. But I will say that I think this team has more needs than people realize at this point. When they dropped in Deshaun Watson a couple of years ago, it was thought that he was the last piece to what was potentially a championship contending roster. But when you look at what has happened to that roster over the past couple of years, Joel Bitonio has openly said that he doesn't want to play anywhere else, but if the team's not moving in the right direction, he's just going to outright retire. Jack Conklin at right tackle has been dealing with injuries. Wyatt Teller has been the subject of trade rumors for the past couple of years. Jerry Jeudy is your number 1 wide receiver at this point in time. Do you feel like you have Cedric Tillman there that can supplement that part of your roster? The defense, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah suffered an injury last year that has many of us wondering if he's going to play again, unfortunately. But there's a lot of needs on this roster that I'm not sure fans really want to accept at this point in time, because it was one of the league's best rosters a couple of years ago. So in this situation, if both quarterbacks are on the board, obviously there's a greater chance they're going to fall in love with one of them. But if for some reason they don't love Shedeur Sanders, trading down, still getting a left tackle, which they ultimately do. We'll discuss that in a little bit, but and filling some of the other needs on this roster with some of the draft capital you get in return, I think is a great scenario for them. Is maybe they don't publicly say that they're rebuilding, but filling some of those roster holes along the way.
All right, before I let you make your pick as the Jaguars, I'll ask you this quickly as someone who follows the Browns closely. Would Shedeur Sanders go to Cleveland, you think?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Deion Sanders has made it clear at this point that, he would be open to that. Shedeur has said that he plays with the Browns on Madden. I don't think that Shedeur is in a situation where, he can necessarily pick where he's going to go. I think he's got to be happy with whatever team is going to take him there in the top 10. And if that's the Browns, I think he'd be excited. If it's the Giants, I think he'd be thrilled. If it's the Raiders, I think he would be over the moon. So whatever it ends up being, if he goes in the top 10, I think he's ultimately going to sell that as a win for him. And there's certainly nobody that is more accustomed to the pressure that he has dealt with through his collegiate career to this point than Shedeur Sanders.
Eric, what do you think? Is this going to be an Eli Manning situation, or do you think it'll be media just making too much out of it?
No, I think it's a lot of, hey, I really appreciate Deion, Shedeur's father, kind of being public about the fact that, hey, this is my son's chance to play in the NFL, and he's not going to go to Sidway. It's not going to be best for him. But I think people took that maybe in a way that like he would pick his spot. I think it's more about a team feeling the need to validate that, hey, we are a good spot to develop Shedeur Sanders. And I think whether it's Tennessee, Cleveland, New York, New York Jets, New York Giants, the Las Vegas Raiders. I think all those teams can kind of show to Shedeur and his team and Cam Ward and his team that, hey, we can build a roster around you as well, too. So I think Shedeur in Cleveland getting a chance to kind of learn from Deshaun, maybe Deshaun not playing this year, but learn from him as well, too, and kind of grow on that team. I think Shedeur has a great chance, and he's shown that he can shoulder a program like Jackson State and Colorado on his shoulders from the off-field and on-field standpoint, too. So if I'm a team looking to rebuild, I'd love to have Shedeur come in there because he's already done that with 2 separate programs now in college.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Josh, finally the Jaguars pick at 5. You haven't taken Mason Graham, who could go higher than this. He's that good. What does he bring to the middle of that defense for Jacksonville? He has Josh Hines Allen on the outside. They drafted Mason Smith last year as well.
Yeah, he's a high effort, high motor type player. He's somebody that's going to get after the quarterback. And when you look at Jacksonville, they have invested heavily along that defensive front with Trayvon Walker, Josh Hines Allen, but you brought in Arik Armstead last offseason. Now you bring in Mason Graham to supplement that unit. I think Liam Cohen, the new incoming head coach, would probably like to go offense to help that side of the ball. But at the end of the day, if you've got a guy like Mason Graham that is potentially going to turn that part of your roster into a strength, I think that's a home run for the Jaguars here at number 5 overall.
Yep, no, I agree. We'll see how long his arms are, and I only say that because Trent Baalke, had he still been the GM, that's one of the things that may have taken Mason Graham off the pick here, but he feels like a layup if you're making this pick. He's so explosive. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll find out who Josh is going to draft with the Browns, and then after that, Eric's going to be the GM for the Jets. This will be our honorary Rick Spielman pick. We'll talk about that right after this. Welcome back to With the First Pick here on CBS Sports Network, going through a 32-team mock draft. 5 picks in the book. Next up, pick number 6. And Josh, you are the hometown Browns GM. Said a little prayer for you during the break. I'm not going to let this go, by the way, as a Steelers fan, so I'm going to lean into this until you guys win a Super Bowl. I should be good to go. Who you taking? Pick 6. You traded down. You got some draft picks to help your team. What's the first pick you're making?
The long-awaited pick. I'm going to address an area of need for the Cleveland Browns the last couple of years, and that is left tackle. I'm taking LSU's Will Campbell to be the left tackle. If I ultimately have to move him to guard in the future, that's fine, but I'm going to start him at left tackle because that is a big need for this organization. Yeah, you still have to figure out the quarterback position, but until you have the protection shored up, I'm not sure that player is going to have a lot of success. So for me, I'm taking Campbell here after trading back, getting a lot of other draft capital that I can use to fill some other areas on this roster, because we know Kevin Stefanski's going to want to go back to that wide zone blocking scheme, get running backs in space. So he's going to need a great running back. You need a great left tackle. And now we've got one here.
Shout out to the graphics team for the practice footage of Will Campbell. That's hardcore. Love it. Next up, the Jets are on the clock here. Eric, you're making this pick here. They need a quarterback. Maybe they need some help along the defensive line. They need a wide receiver. Checks notes. You went with safety Malachi Starks, this is the highest we've had him going, but he's a special player.
Yeah, special player. I think that when you're picking this early in the draft, and people have talked about it, so it's not a new topic, but there's not a lot of special high-end elite talents in this draft class. I think if you're the New York Jets, new GM, new head coach, you kind of throw needs out the window a little bit. And if you can't get maybe a franchise quarterback, hey, who's the most special player we can get, especially for Aaron Glenn's defense? Also for the Jets, 4 or 5 of their starting defensive backs, their 2 corners, 2 safeties, and their nickel. 4 of those guys are free agents. So they have a need in the defensive backfield in general. And there's more depth at corner in this draft than safety. So I think for the Jets, looking for an impact player on that defense, kind of guide the next era, I think Malachi Starks is a pretty special player.
Yeah, and he's got legit speed. He's like a 10.500 guy out of high school, so he can move even though he plays safety. Next up, Carolina Panthers. They need a wide receiver, Josh, and you're taking Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan. And I think if Will Johnson, tell me if you agree with this, had been healthy the whole year, he missed much of the second half of the season with a toe injury, he might have been the first cornerback off the board. He might have gone a little higher. What do you think about that?
Yeah, he's kind of a polarizing prospect. He's one that I personally love. I know there's concerns about what kind of a speed he's going to run. And if he can do that at the NFL Combine, check that box, that would obviously do well for his stock. 2023 was fantastic. He looked like the best cornerback in all of college football. In fact, I thought he was kind of like a Patrick Surtain level of prospect at that position. 2024 was a setback. He was dealing with some nagging injuries, and that's what I attribute to some of the play that we saw from this past season, because he was gambling more. So it was almost like he didn't trust his acceleration, his instincts quite as much as maybe he had the year prior, when he had the luxury of reacting as quickly as he naturally could. So I think if he's able to get back to that healthy form, I'm betting on him being the caliber of cornerback that is among the best in the league, because I think he's got that level of talent. And yeah, you mentioned the Panthers have a need at wide receiver. They have a need at defensive tackle. They've got a need at edge rusher. They've got a need everywhere. So to get a player like Johnson, who I think could be a blue chip player, once fully healthy, is ultimately a win for them here in the first round.
So we saw Malachi Starks go 7, which has been higher than we've seen in most mock drafts. At pick 9, I'm the Saints here. I'm taking another young man who we haven't seen go quite this high, but the more I watch him, the more I love him. Mike Green, the edge rusher out of Marshall, by way of UVA. My fun fact is that he grew up in Williamsburg, Virginia, went to the same high school, Lafayette High School, as Lawrence Taylor. And I laugh every time I see this one-on-one rep at the Senior Bowl, because it's so unfair to Josh Connerly, who didn't have a chance. Josh Connerly's a left tackle, asked to play with right tackle in these one-on-one drills. Mike Green did not care, because he ran over him like he was not there, didn't practice on Thursday because he didn't need to. And I think he has an opportunity to be a top 10 pick with the way with which he plays. Another guy that's sort of making his way onto the radar, Eric, is the offensive tackle you took at pick 10. And he went ahead of Calvin Banks Jr., who is my OT1 right now. But you and Armand Mbu, right tackle for Missouri. He's listed as 6'3". I don't care. He has 34-inch arms, which is plenty long. Are you playing him outside? You kicking him inside? What's the plan with Mbu?
Yeah, I think for the Bears, I mean, hey, they can have him challenge at left tackle with Braxton Jones. He can be their left guard or right guard. He can even be their long-term center. I think he reminds me a lot of Zach Tom coming out of Wake Forest, but a more athletic and more fluid version of that player. I think that's what makes him really special. I think Mbu is one of the best players this entire draft class. I think he's actually similar to, again, maybe you can play him at tackle, maybe not necessarily a guard only, but to Quentin Nelson a couple of years back, where I think NFL teams are going to lead the draft process, especially after the combine, positive that he's going to be an impact player on their offensive line. So I think if you're the Chicago Bears, maybe it's him and then Will Campbell in your top 2, but they want to address that offensive line for Caleb Williams. I think Mbu is kind of a draft and figure it out later in training camp where you exactly want to play him.
Yeah, absolutely. He has some of the most consistent tape at right tackle that I saw all fall, and he was a lot of fun to watch. Pick 11, Josh, you were the 49ers, and you're taking Shamar Stewart. And I'll say this about Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher, quotation marks. He is out of Texas A&M. He is absolutely enormous, and I think he's going to blow up the combine. But I want to ask you about pick 12, because that's where the Cowboys are. I have them taking Tet McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona, and I mention that because rarely does he fall this far. Also, Ashton Genty's not going here. And I want to get your thoughts. If you like this idea, if there's more bang for the buck with Tet McMillan as a big target opposite CeeDee Lamb, or would you lean towards Genty or maybe even someone else if you're the Dallas Cowboys here at pick 12?
I think it's incredibly good value for the Cowboys to get him here. I think he would be somebody that takes some of the pressure off of CeeDee Lamb, as you mentioned, because they haven't had that caliber of player opposite him since Amari Cooper left. They were getting some contributions from Brandon Cooks, but Brandon Cooks has been battling injuries. Michael Gallup, of course, did not return from his injury in the way that they had hoped. So they've been missing somebody that can kind of take some of the pressure off of CeeDee Lamb. So I think if you put Tet McMillan in that offense, you're going to free up some one-on-one opportunities for CeeDee Lamb. And if there's anything that we know about him, he's great when the ball is in the air. He's going to go get it. So with a healthy Dak Prescott, you're throwing to guys like Tet McMillan and CeeDee Lamb. I think you're well off there. But Tet McMillan's not somebody that's just a go ball type of guy. I mean, he's somebody that can work the underneath a little bit like a Drake London in the way that he was used at USC and now in Atlanta. So I think he's a good complement to what they already have in Dallas and good value as well.
Yeah, Drake London and T. Higgins, those are the two sort of comps you hear for Tet McMillan, and I mean, that's fantastic value. That's the type of player you get, whether it's Dallas or somewhere else. All right, guys, 12 picks in the books. We're going to take a quick break here, and we come back. Eric's going to be the GM, Chris Greer, for the Miami Dolphins. We're going to see what they're going to do at pick 13, and we'll talk about that and the rest of the picks right after this. Welcome back to With the First Pick here, working our way through all 32 picks of this pre-combine mock draft. I'm Ryan Wilson. That's Josh Elbridge, and that's Eric Galco from the Shrine Bowl. Big day today, Josh. All right, pick 13. We're up here. Let's do this. And Eric, this is why I love having you on the show. You're mixing it up, and you're making picks that not everyone is making when you do these mock drafts, and picks that typically end up coming true. You had the Jets going with Malachi Starks at 7, Armand Mimbu, the right tackle for Mizzou, going to the Bears at 10, and here at 13. I actually love this pick a lot. Somehow this man got overshadowed at 330-plus pounds by Mason Graham, but Kenneth Grant is a special player, and I think he feels a huge need, literally and figuratively, for Miami.
Yeah, I think Kenneth Grant, I'm not sure where, other people outside the NFL have him, but a lot of NFL teams love Kenneth Grant. I don't think he gets out of the top 20, 25 picks in the draft for sure. And again, a lot of times we fall victim to sometimes groupthink, and there's a world where you can look at Kenneth Grant and say, is he the best defensive tackle in this draft class? So I think he's that kind of special and that talented and can do a lot of different things on a defensive line unit. And last year, the Dolphins didn't replace Christian Wilkins in the offseason, who they lost. They've got some edge rusher talent in this draft class later to go get, but I think right now Grant can really challenge to be one of the defensive leaders on that Miami Dolphins defense.
Yeah, that feels like an easy pick. And if he had been playing somewhere not called Michigan, you wonder if there'd be a little bit more buzz about him. But I think as we get through this process, your prediction will end up proving true because he can ball out. All right, Josh, pick 14. Indianapolis Colts. They have a bunch of needs. They got to figure out the quarterback situation. So you're going to get Anthony Richardson a little help. And you went with, I don't know if anyone had a better season than this young man, Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. I think he went from what felt like a late day 2, early day 3 pick over the summer to a legit top 15 talent because he was the offense at Penn State, and you have him going to Indianapolis.
Yeah, and people are going to wonder why Tyler Warren here as opposed to a Colston Loveland from Michigan. And I think it's more of just a scheme fit in what Indianapolis needs at this point in time. Colston Loveland gives you a little bit more of the, spread out vertical threat that you would typically look for at the tight end position if you're looking for a Dawson, a Dalton Kincaid or somebody like that. But what Indianapolis needs is somebody that's going to line up in line, somebody that can help in that regards, because they've already got Josh Downs, they've already got A.D. Mitchell, they've got Pittman there, so they've got some guys that can play out in space. You need somebody like Warren that's going to be able to take off some of the pressure underneath, be moved around the formation a little bit, and I think ultimately that's what's going to help Anthony Richardson. And I think Shane Steichen is the type of coach that's able to maximize his potential.
Yeah, it's funny. Our buddy Rick Spielman isn't here to hate my comp for Tyler Warren, but it makes sense in the context of this conversation. Dallas Clark. I got a little Dallas Clark feel from Tyler Warren. We'll see how that plays out. He wears glasses, too, so a lot to be said for guys who wears glasses. Next up, pick 15, the Atlanta Falcons. And I wonder if this young man goes a little bit higher. I love the way he plays. Off-ball linebacker is sort of a weird position depending on the team drafting. The Seahawks love off-ball linebackers. The Philadelphia Eagles do not in round 1. But for the Atlanta Falcons, I went with Jalen Walker out of Georgia. He can play off-ball, but he can play outside, and you can line him up pretty much anywhere. And it feels like as the sideline-to-sideline speed becomes more and more important in the NFL, players like Jalen Walker become more and more valued. So he feels like a top 15 pick. They could go straight edge rush here if they want, but I think you get a 2-1 bang for your buck in much the same way we talked about Travis Hunter at cornerback wide receiver. So I love Jalen Walker, the way he played this year. And I thought in a lot of ways he outplayed the guy who's getting drafted after him, his teammate. Eric, you are the Cardinals GM, Monty Austinfort, and you are restocking the edge rush position the year after they drafted Darius Robinson. You're going with Mykel Williams out of Georgia.
Yeah, I think for one, before getting to Mykel Williams, this is probably the prime spot that if we've seen 2 quarterbacks only so far in the draft, this is a spot I expect to be a trade opportunity. Just picking after them, the Seahawks are the next pick or a pick or 2, the Steelers, the Rams, all these teams could be looking for a quarterback, whether it's Jackson Dart, Kyle McCord, Will Howard, Jalen Moreau, whoever. The quarterback 3 spot probably starts around pick 16 for a team trading up like we saw last year with J.J. McCarthy. So I think this is a spot to watch out for that. But in terms of Mykel Williams, immensely talented. The Cardinals have been piecemealing edge rusher the last couple of years, and he's a Georgia pass rusher. Jonathan Gannon, former Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator, he's seen what the Eagles have done drafting Georgia pass rushers. I think Mykel fits that description pretty well for the Cardinals moving forward.
Absolutely. Pick 17, the Cincinnati Bengals. Colston Loveland make a ton of sense here, but the pick you have, Josh, I actually like this pick a lot. And I described Derek Harmon, the defensive lineman out of Oregon, as a slow burn in that he doesn't do anything super sexy, but the more you watch him, the more you love the way he plays because he's so consistent.
Yeah, and as Eric was talking about this possibly being an area for a third quarterback, tomorrow on CBSSports.com in my new mock, I do actually have a quarterback in this range to one of the teams that he mentioned. I will say that Cincinnati has to address the defense here because it's clear that they are prioritizing the offense here, franchise tagging T. Higgins if they're unable to reach a long-term extension. So if you're going to funnel so many of your assets towards the offensive side of the ball, you're going to find some other ways to supplement your defense. And I think you have to address the defense here in the first round. Now, how did I ultimately settle on Derek Harmon? I thought about Mykel Williams. Trey Hendrickson has requested a trade. Sam Hubbard is a guy that could potentially be upgraded. But I ultimately went with Derek Harmon because I think he has a higher floor than somebody like a Walter Nolan. And when you're Cincinnati, you're in this contention window. I think putting him in on that defense maybe gives you a little bit more in year one than maybe what you would get from Walter Nolan. So that's why I went in that direction. But at the end of the day, I think Cincinnati has to go defense here.
Yeah, I mean, they could go wide receiver or tight end and just score 80 points a game and still go 500 because the defense is so terrible. Or to your point, they could try to update that defense. And I do like Derek Harmon. The more you watch him, the more you end up liking the way he plays. Pick 18, the Seattle Seahawks. No one knows what the Seahawks are going to do in the first round because they always seem to zig when everyone thinks they zag. But there's too much value, it feels like, in Kelvin Banks Jr., the left tackle out of Texas, not to take him here. Now, you have Charles Cross. You drafted Abe Lucas. When those guys are healthy, they're pretty good. So you can kick Kelvin Banks inside for a year or two and figure it out. But they desperately need help on the interior of that offensive line, and Geno Smith can certainly attest to that. And I think Kelvin Banks is probably one of, if not the most athletic offensive tackle in my mind, and he's my OT1. So I'm taking him here at 18 if I'm Seattle and just figuring out where to play him. All right, Eric, you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Liam Cohen's gone. Baker Mayfield's still there. You got some questions at wide receiver. And I think if Brady Cook, who was at the Shrine Bowl, and I think had he been healthy, we'd have seen much bigger numbers from Luther Burden. But Brady Cook, probably one of the second toughest players in college football after Shedeur Sanders, was banged up for the entire year. So Burden didn't put up quite the numbers he did in 2023, but that doesn't take anything away from how good he is in terms of his juice down the field.
Yeah, and similar to your logic with Kelvin Banks, I think Luther Burden is probably one of the best, if not the best guy left, and has the most special traits of any offensive player, in my opinion, left on the board here. So a little bit of this is just best player available for the Bucs too. But hey, Chris Godwin coming off injury and a free agent, and Mike Evans getting up there. He's can't be doing 1,000 yards a season for much longer, I can't imagine, right? So I think the Bucs, who have already have some depth at receiver, adding Luther Burden, maybe replacing Chris Godwin, maybe helping the Liam Cohen transition a little bit by giving that more offense, some more firepower is probably the reason why Luther Burden makes sense here. But I can't see a guy like him and his talent lasting much longer past pick 19.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's funny how some of these guys are getting pushed down because some of the other players that perhaps we haven't talked about previously are getting pushed up, and understandably so. All right, Josh, you're George Payton in Denver. You got the quarterback position right last year at pick 12. You and Sean Payton did. And now you're getting Bo Nix a weapon and Colson Loveland. I absolutely love this. And this sort of feels like the next evolution, the next step for Bo Nix. And you can call him a system quarterback if you want. That system seems to be working for Bo Nix, and Colson Loveland goes a long way in helping that.
Yeah, I think you have to look at what Sean Payton has done even in his past, how he has built those Saints rosters, whether it was Alvin Kamara, Jimmy Graham. So now you get a guy like Colston Loveland who can be that pass-catching threat at the tight end position for you in Denver. I think that's an ideal situation if you're Bo Nix. You're able to help a young quarterback in that role. They could go running back, but Ashton Genty is potentially a guy that they could target here. But I think Loveland just gives you a little bit more in the passing game and supplementing that part of your roster when you have a guy like Bo Nix who showed so much as a rookie last year is the best way to go about this. And I think Sean Payton would be happy to have a player like him in his offense.
And he could be gone 10 picks prior to this. That's how good I think he is, especially when you get him with a quarterback with a little more consistency than we saw out of the Michigan QBs last fall. All right, you mentioned Ashton Genty, Josh. He's still available. Pick 21, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They got a ton of needs as well, including QB. We'll talk about what they do right after the break. Welcome back to With First Pick. Mock draft, all 32 picks. We are 20 down. Got to get to pick 32. Next up, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Have they learned nothing, guys? Are they going to take another running back after drafting Najee Harris 4 years ago? Najee Harris almost certainly hit free agency. Checks notes. Yes, they are going to take Ashton Genty here at pick 21. I was on Pittsburgh radio yesterday talking about this, and there are a ton of needs on this team, and Josh talked about needs with the Cleveland Browns. The Steelers have a lot of needs as well. Quarterback is one of them. I'll ask you, Eric, is there value taking Ashton Genty here? They have a need at running back, and I think he can do a lot, but would you target defensive line, defensive back, wide receiver, or do you think this is worth it at 21?
I think really for teams in the playoffs, which would be the rest of the teams now, the rest of this mock draft, is the question of, do we try to get a high upside talent because we're going to be in the playoffs again next year and it's hard to get those guys, or a guy's going to be a plug-and-play player right away for us like Ashton Genty? I think for the Steelers, that's kind of the question, but they've done such a great job in the draft in the mid to later rounds. I think for the Steelers, adding Ashton Genty, who can be an impact player for whomever their quarterback of the future is really tough to pass on. What a phenomenal year by Genty. He's done things as a run blocker, as a pass blocker, out of the backfield, as well as being a dynamic player in the run game. So I think if you're the Steelers, even though maybe that first round running back lost a little bit of appeal, I think he's a pretty special player at pick 21.
Hey, Josh, I'll ask you this because you're a Browns fan, AFC North concerns you. I would imagine when they drafted Najee Harris, you probably weren't concerned. Would you have any concerns as a Browns fan having to face Ashton Genty, or you would be more worried about, Emeka Ibuka, for example?
I would say, just generally speaking, a wide receiver is probably more threatening. I do love Ashton Genty, so it's a difficult question because I think he's, as Eric said, both dynamic in the run game and the pass game. The numbers weren't quite there in the pass game this past season, but when you look at 2023, he had over 40 receptions and he didn't drop a single target. So he's very well-rounded. He's a great runner. He's good in pass protection. He's a great pass catcher. So even if you spread him out a little bit, start him in the backfield, spread him out, I think there's things that you can do with him that's a little bit more unorthodox that you would do with most running backs. So he's a little different than I think most running backs. But generally speaking, probably a wide receiver is probably more threatening, at least in the AFC North.
Yeah, I think Ashton Genty's in the same conversation as Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs. So we'll see. He's probably long gone here, but that's a fun exercise. All right, I'm going to read through picks 22 through 28 just so we can get to some of these guys. Then I'll circle back and get your thoughts on some of these players. The Chargers took Savon Rebel, the cornerback out of ECU. That was Eric's pick. At 23, the Packers took Jahdae Barron, cornerback / slot out of Texas. That was Josh's pick. The Vikings took Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle out of Ole Miss, who is freakishly special. Sub 300 pounds, but he plays much bigger and stronger than that. I made that pick for Minnesota. Eric took Tyleik Williams, the defensive tackle out of Ohio State for the Texans. Josh took Josh Simmons, left tackle out of Ohio State, who suffered an injury in that Oregon game, to the LA Rams. Ravens get James Pierce Jr., juiced up edge rusher. I made that pick. And then Eric took Tyler Booker, Lions, for the Lions. Tyler Booker's the guard out of Alabama who, this guy's a grown man. He can go much higher than this. Josh, I want to ask you quickly, pick 23, Jahdae Barron, another guy that I love. He reminds me a little bit of Brian Branch. Why do you like him in Green Bay?
I think they need help at that position first and foremost. The nickel spot has become a starter in the NFL today. You've got to be able to play in space, and Jahdae Barron is great in space. He's somebody that's going to get pass catchers, ball carriers to the ground, and I think that's incredibly valuable in the modern NFL offense that is very spread out. I think Green Bay is probably likely to move on from Jair Alexander this offseason. So to bring in a guy like Barron, who's going to help you on one spot, you've got Carrington Valentine on the other boundary. Now all you have to do is potentially go out and get a free agent to supplement the other boundary spots. But this is the tendency of Green Bay. They've used 12 of their last 14 first-round picks on the defensive side of the ball. So there's no need to change the routine at this point.
Hey, Eric, I want to ask you about the pick 28 there, the Lions taking Tyler Booker, because I think one of the things that maybe we don't talk enough about in the media is that while Ben Johnson is fantastic at his job, and he's going to probably do that in Chicago pretty quickly, one of the things that Detroit had that helped out Jared Goff a lot was that offensive line. And Tyler Booker feels like a Detroit Lion with the way he plays and his approach to football. I would imagine there's a chance he goes earlier than this. But how does he fit on that offensive line with Penei Sewell and all those guys that are difference makers?
Yeah, I think for Detroit, I mean, they can look at a lot of different positions because they don't have any major needs, but they can really take a luxury pick if they want to at receiver, at D tackle, at cornerback. But Kevin Zeitler, starter for them, is going to be a free agent. Probably best for them to kind of move on from him and find a long-term replacement. And they have Christian Mahogany there as well, too. But I think the Detroit Lions are going to have even more players coming up with salary cap implications. So finding plug-and-play starters early in the draft that can be those kind of cost control contracts be super important for Detroit. And Tyler Booker is a multi-year starter at Alabama at guard, can play left and right guard, has played both at Alabama. I think his versatility as a rookie will play a huge role for the Detroit Lions, trying to keep that stability on offense.
I agree. And he's so much fun. And it's weird that we haven't talked more about him. Before we get out of here and take a break, I'll talk quickly about the pick before pick 27. James Pierce Jr., I'm interested to see what he weighs next week in Indianapolis in the combine. I think he played under 250, 245-ish, and that feels like the height, weight, speed that the Eric DeCosta and the Ravens look for in those edge rushers, whether it's Odafe Owe or David Ajabo a couple of years ago. And those guys are juiced up, twitched up specimens off the edge. The difference is James Pierce is further along in his development, it feels like, than those two players who were more raw than developed. And the way he played at Tennessee, sweet mercy. If you told me he weighed 265, I would believe that all day. So that feels exactly like what the Ravens would do. Should James Pierce be there? They need help at offensive line as well. Maybe Tyler Booker would be a consideration. But it feels like the Ravens every year get those draft picks right, especially in the first round. And they certainly have the playoff pedigree to prove that. All right, guys, 28 picks are in the books. 4 more to go, including the Super Bowl champ, Philadelphia Eagles. What are they going to do? We'll talk about that, as well as the Kansas City Chiefs getting offensive line help. We'll find out together, and we'll talk about that right after the break. Welcome back to With First Pick. Our pre-combine mock draft coming down the stretch here. Pick 29, the Washington Commanders had one of the most surprising and fun seasons of any team in the league. And Josh, you're taking Oregon left tackle Josh Connerly. Insanely athletic, also insanely raw. How do you think he fits into that Commanders offense?
Well, I think he'll follow what I like to call the Penei Sewell career path, a starting left tackle at Oregon, making the transition to right tackle in the NFL, which Sewell, of course, has done with the Lions. Jaden Daniels was fantastic this past season. I think the offensive line still needs some reinforcements. So I'm playing Josh Connerly at right tackle, and I think he really showed over those last couple of games that he was improving, because throughout the course of the year, his hand placement was bad, but I thought towards the end of the season, he did a much better job of that. So I'm banking on him being the type of 5-star recruit that he was coming out of high school, reaching that pedigree with Washington, and Daniels is a player that's capable of helping him reach that potential. He's somebody that's going to take pressure off of his offensive linemen. And I think that's a big need for Washington here as they're trying to fortify the offense moving forward.
Yeah, few teams crushed the draft like the Commanders did, excluding Jaden Daniels, which was a home run pick. Even after that, they hit a lot of doubles and triples. Next up, pick 30, Buffalo Bills. I considered wide receiver here. Matthew Golden, I love out of Texas, but instead I went with Nick Imamori, the safety out of South Carolina. They got to get tougher in the secondary, and I think Imamori, the way he plays in terms of both coming downhill where he will blow you up or making plays around the ball. He has incredible ball skills. He always has a nose to be where the ball is, and I love the way he played for South Carolina this season, and I think that's going to translate next year, whether he's in the first round or a top 40 pick. I think he's one of these guys that has a chance to be really good at this level. Next up, Eric, you're picking for the Kansas City Chiefs, and this feels like a post-Tampa Bay Chiefs Super Bowl where you have to fix the offensive line. You're taking Donovan Jackson, who had to kick out at left tackle after Josh Simmons got hurt in that Oregon game, and I thought he availed himself nicely. But if he's kicking inside the guard, or maybe he's going to play tackle in your world, are you leaving Joe Thuney out at tackle? What are the plans there to fix the left tackle position as well?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what we did the Chicago Bears about 26 picks earlier, which is draft Armand Menbu and figure it out later. I think for the Kansas City Chiefs, when you're picking at 31, getting your preferred left tackle guy is probably asking for a lot. And I think if you're the Chiefs saying, hey, let's get the best offensive line we can in here. Joe Thuney playing left tackle maybe wasn't ideal for him, but he made it work at part of the season, especially in the Super Bowl. And I think Donovan Jackson did the same thing at Ohio State this year at left tackle too. So I think you could try both those guys out, but also keep in mind Trey Smith, the free agent this offseason, Joe Thuney, a free agent in 2026. So maybe left tackle's need right now, but guard might be a need next year as well too. And you don't want to pass on a guy like Donovan Jackson when you can at pick 31.
I'm with you 100%. And he's another guy, sort of like Tyler Book, that seems to be flying under the radar, maybe because of the position he plays, but he had a fantastic season and was asked to kick out the left tackle, and I thought he more than held his own there. All right, Josh, we got to tip our hats to our coworkers who are Eagles fans, and they're the champs. Hooray for Philadelphia. Nick Scorton is who you had them taking edge rush. He feels like an Eagles edge rusher. Didn't have the season perhaps that he had at Purdue in 2023 before he transferred to Texas A&M. But I'll just say this. I was talking to someone about this yesterday. It feels like both him and Shamar Stewart, once they get the coaching, their game might go to the next level. And physically, you guys look like Nick Scorton get off the bus. So you picked him going to Philadelphia. What are you thinking there?
Well, first of all, to pull back the curtain a little bit, I was kind of hoping Donovan Jackson would be there because I think he's got the type of positional flexibility that Philadelphia loves. They're prone to taking offensive or defensive line here in the first round, but without the options that I wanted at offensive line, I looked at the other side of the ball. We obviously saw how Philadelphia just won the Super Bowl. Brandon Graham is a free agent. Josh Sweat is a free agent. That roster is already incredibly expensive. And although we know the Eagles are willing to kick the salary cap can down the road a little bit, at some point you have to supplement the roster with some cheaper, younger talent. And this may be an offseason where you take a guy like Scorton, who at one point was projected to be taken higher, to kind of reset the edge rusher position. Maybe Brandon Graham comes back for yet another season. I don't know, but I think getting Scorton in there, who's kind of a built through power type edge rusher, to go with Nolan Smith and some of those other pieces that you've assembled there on the defensive line, I think is an ideal situation for Philadelphia here at the end of the round, the first round.
All right, in the couple minutes we have left, I want to ask you this, Eric. You talked about maybe middle of the first rounds where some teams interested in quarterbacks might move up. I've been beating the Kyle McCord drum since the fall. He had a fantastic Shrine Bowl. Who are some players, quarterback-wise, that might sneak into the back of the first round if teams are really falling in love with one of these guys that's not named Cam or Shedeur?
Yeah, I think we're looking at, NFL teams are split right now talking to them. If this is going to be a class, kind of like Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota, where there's two in the first two picks and then none till the fourth round. If it's like last year in some ways where the guys got pushed up, or also last year after those 5 first-round picks, 6, it went Spencer Rattler in the 5th. So teams are kind of split of where that's going to be at. But Jackson Dart's got a ton of upside. He's still younger as a quarterback, a lot of room to get better for him. Kyle McCord, I think at Ohio State, he was looked at as a first-round pick, goes to Syracuse, has a great year. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ends up being a top 50 pick. Tyler Shuck at Louisville, and then kind of the unique wild card is Jalen Milroe about where teams feel about him. So I think the over-under would be probably 2.5, but I would say you'd more likely to say 3 quarterbacks and 2 will be going in the first round.
Hey, Josh, are 3 quarterbacks going round 1?
I would probably take the under at this point, but we always talk about how quarterbacks get pushed up the board, so you never know.
I will say this, and I don't know if this makes you feel better as a Steelers fan. I'm talking about this class is better than the 2022 class that included Super Bowl champ Kenny Pickett. Whatever, I'll get over that. All right, guys, that is a wrap with the first pick. Thanks to Josh. Thanks to Eric. Get with the first pick wherever you get your podcasts. And we will see you guys later in the week. And we'll be at the Combine all next week covering us there. See you then.